My name is Terry Wilson, 36 years old, and until last month I was the Director of Systems Integration at TechFin Solutions. I spent 8 years building my career there only to be fired in the middle of a $499 million acquisition by someone who called me irrelevant. What the CEO's precious nephew didn't realize was that without me, their entire technical transition would collapse. If you're wondering how my silence brought down a deal worth nearly $500 million, stick around. Before I dive into this corporate nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to catch more stories of workplace justice served cold. Let me take you back to where it all began. I graduated from MIT with a computer science degree, bright-eyed and ready to change the tech world. Like many women in tech, I quickly learned that excellence wasn't always enough. You needed resilience too. I joined TechFin Solutions 8 years ago as a systems analyst. The company specialized in financial software for mid-sized banks and credit unions. We weren't the biggest player, but we had a solid reputation for reliability and innovation. I worked my way up from that entry-level position, earning promotions to senior analyst, then team lead, then department manager, and finally, director of systems integration. What made TechFin special in the beginning was its culture. Amanda Prescott, our CEO and founder, built the company on values of collaboration, excellence, and respect. At least that was before things changed. My direct boss, Jackson Phillips, was the chief technology officer. He was brilliant technically, but conflict-averse to a fault. He recognized my talents and generally supported me, but would fold under pressure when challenged by those above him. This weakness would eventually cost me dearly. 3 key colleagues shaped my experience at TechFin. Samantha Reyes was our database architecture manager and my closest work friend. She was fiercely loyal and unafraid to speak truth to power. Then there was Marcus Chen from Global Finance, the company looking to acquire us. As their CTO, he was leading the technical evaluation of our systems. He was thorough, fair, and valued expertise over titles. And then there was Ryan Prescott, Amanda's nephew. Ryan joined the company just 6 months before everything fell apart. Despite having only 3 years of general management experience at his previous job, he was hired as Senior Vice President of Strategy. No interview process, no competing candidates, just a fancy office next to his aunt with an inflated salary that became the subject of break room whispers. From our first interaction, I knew Ryan would be trouble. During his welcome tour, Amanda introduced us outside my office. "And this is Terry Wilson, our Director of Systems Integration," Amanda said warmly. "She's been with us 8 years and knows our systems better than anyone." Ryan barely looked at me before asking, "And what exactly does a systems integration director do that a good developer team couldn't handle?" His tone made it clear he wasn't actually interested in an answer. Before I could respond, Amanda jumped in to explain my department's critical role in maintaining the cohesive architecture of our various software systems. "Terry's team will be essential for the global finance acquisition," she added. That caught his attention, though not in the way I'd hoped. From that moment on, I could tell he viewed me as competition for the spotlight in the biggest deal of the company's history. The acquisition itself had been in the works for nearly a year. Global Finance was offering $499 million for TechFin, a price that reflected both our current value and future potential. Our shareholders were thrilled. Amanda would receive a massive payout while retaining a leadership role in the merged company. Most employees would keep their jobs with expanded opportunities in the larger organization. My role was crucial because I understood how all our systems worked together. TechFin had grown through several smaller acquisitions ourselves, resulting in a complex technological ecosystem. I had led the integration of each acquired system, creating the documentation and transition protocols that made everything function smoothly. For the global finance deal to work, they needed to understand how to integrate our systems with theirs, without disrupting service to our existing clients. This was no small task, and it's why I had spent months preparing comprehensive transition documents and meeting with their technical teams. By all accounts, the acquisition was proceeding well. Due diligence was nearly complete, and we were in the final stages of transition planning. The deal was scheduled to close in just 6 weeks. Then Ryan decided I was in his way. Ryan's arrival changed the company's atmosphere almost immediately. Despite his grand title of SVP of Strategy, no one seemed clear on what he actually did all day. He spent most of his time in meetings with Amanda, or making demands of various department heads, usually for presentations or reports that already existed, but that he wanted reformatted to his specifications. Our first direct conflict happened about a month after he joined. I was scheduled to present our system architecture to Global Finance's integration team. Ryan showed up unannounced just as we were starting. "I'll be sitting in," he announced, taking the seat at the head of the table that I had been about to take. As SVP of Strategy, I need to ensure all presentations to Global Finance align with our strategic messaging. I adjusted quickly, standing instead, and proceeding with my detailed technical presentation. The Global Finance team asked insightful questions, which I answered thoroughly. Ryan remained silent until near the end, when Marcus asked about our timeline for API integration. "We can accelerate that timeline," Ryan interjected before I could answer. "Terry's team is being too conservative with their estimates." Marcus looked confused. "The timeline seems reasonable given the complexity. Rushing could introduce risks." "Risk is where opportunity lives," Ryan replied with the confident smile of someone quoting a motivational poster. "I'll work with Terry to tighten this up." After the meeting, I approached Ryan privately. "Those timelines are based on actual development and testing requirements. They're not arbitrary." "Look, Terry," he said, not bothering to hide his condescension. "This deal is about more than just technical details. It's about showing confidence and ambition. Your cautious approach might work for maintenance mode, but this is about transformation." "Transformation still requires functional software," I countered. "Promising what we can't deliver will damage trust." He chuckled, placing a hand on my shoulder that I immediately shrugged off. "This is why you're still a director after 8 years. You think too small." Over the next few weeks, Ryan's interference grew more frequent and problematic. He began excluding me from meetings where my team's work was discussed. I would discover changes to our integration plans secondhand, often after Ryan had made commitments we couldn't realistically meet. When I created a comprehensive transition roadmap for our core banking platform, Ryan presented it to Amanda and the board as his own work. Samantha witnessed this and told me immediately. When I confronted him, he claimed he had enhanced my basic outline. The version he shared was my document with a new cover page and his name. I tried addressing the situation properly through the appropriate channels. I scheduled a meeting with Jackson, bringing documentation of Ryan's actions and their potential impact on the acquisition. "I understand your frustration," Jackson said after I presented my concerns. "But Ryan has Amanda's complete confidence. She believes he's bringing a fresh, strategic perspective." "Fresh doesn't mean correct," I argued. "He's making technical commitments we can't fulfill without significant risks." Jackson sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, this acquisition is Amanda's legacy. Ryan is her nephew. Family dynamics are involved that go beyond the workplace. My advice: document everything. Maintain your standards, but try not to directly challenge Ryan. Once the deal closes, things will settle into a more normal pattern." I left Jackson's office understanding that I was on my own. He wouldn't risk his position to challenge the CEO's nephew, regardless of the technical consequences. Meanwhile, the acquisition process continued advancing. During this period, I had several direct meetings with Marcus and his technical team without Ryan present. These sessions were productive and built significant trust. Marcus clearly valued my expertise and candor about both the strengths and limitations of our systems. "Your documentation is exceptional," Marcus told me, after one particularly detailed review session. "Most companies we look at have architectural diagrams that bear little resemblance to reality. Yours are precise and practical." "That's because I believe in documenting what actually exists, not what we wish existed," I replied. Marcus laughed. "That philosophy would save our industry billions in failed projects." This growing rapport with Marcus only intensified Ryan's apparent jealousy. After learning about my successful sessions with Global Finance, he implemented a new protocol requiring his approval for all communication with the acquiring company. This created bottlenecks that delayed critical information exchanges. I continued doing my job with professionalism and integrity, but each day brought new obstacles placed in my path by Ryan. What had once been a job I loved was becoming a source of constant stress and frustration. I started experiencing anxiety symptoms, something that had never been an issue before. Still, I believed that expertise and results would ultimately matter more than politics. The acquisition's success depended on a smooth technical transition, and I was determined to ensure that happened despite Ryan's interference. I had no idea how drastically things were about to escalate. As the acquisition process intensified, so did Ryan's efforts to undermine me. He moved beyond merely excluding me from meetings or taking credit for my work. Now he was actively spreading misinformation about my performance. I discovered this when Samantha pulled me aside after a department head meeting I hadn't been invited to. "You need to know what's happening," she said, her voice low. "Ryan told everyone your team is behind schedule on the transition documentation. He claimed you've been resistant to his strategic guidance, and it's creating risks for the acquisition timeline." "That's completely false," I replied, feeling my chest tighten with anger. "My team is ahead of schedule on every deliverable. I've documented every change Ryan has requested, including the ones we advised against." "I know," Samantha said. Several of us spoke up. Jackson looked uncomfortable but didn't contradict Ryan. Amanda asked for a formal status report by Friday. I spent that night updating our project, tracking dashboard with irrefutable evidence of our progress, including timestamps of when each document had been completed and shared. I also compiled a log of all the instances where Ryan had delayed approvals or changed requirements late in the process. When I submitted this report to Jackson, and Amanda Jackson called me immediately. "This is very thorough," he said, sounding nervous, "but the detailed log of Ryan's interventions might come across as blame-shifting." "It's not blame-shifting to document actual events," I replied. "These delays weren't caused by my team. That's simply a fact." "I understand, but Amanda is very protective of Ryan. Maybe we could revise this to focus just on the progress metrics." I refused. The report is accurate and professional. If presenting factual information is political suicide, then the company has bigger problems than project delays. 2 days later, I learned that Ryan had created a parallel transition team staffed with junior engineers who reported directly to him. They were duplicating work my team had already completed, often without access to the same depth of system knowledge. This wasn't just inefficient, it was dangerous. Contradictory documentation could create confusion during the actual system integration, potentially causing service disruptions for our clients. The situation came to a head during a critical technical review with Global Finance. Both my team and Ryan's parallel team were present along with Marcus and his senior engineers. Ryan had insisted on presenting first, walking through his team's simplified version of the integration approach. Marcus listened politely, but began asking increasingly detailed questions that Ryan couldn't answer. After several awkward exchanges where Ryan deferred to his junior staff, who also struggled with the technical specifics, Marcus turned to me. "Terry, your documentation indicated a different approach to the authentication service migration. Could you clarify?" For the next hour, I walked through the actual complexities of our system architecture, explaining the carefully sequenced migration steps my team had designed. Marcus and his engineers asked probing questions that I answered confidently, referencing specific system behaviors and interdependencies. Ryan sat silently, his expression darkening, as he watched Marcus and his team engage with me as the clear technical authority. When one of Global Finance's engineers commented that my approach would save them weeks of potential troubleshooting, Ryan abruptly stood up. "We're getting lost in technical minutiae," he announced. "Let's take a step back and focus on the strategic business outcomes, rather than getting bogged down in coding details." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "In my experience, successful integrations happen precisely because someone has thoroughly understood the minutiae. The strategic business outcomes depend on these systems actually working together." The meeting continued with Ryan largely sidelined as the technical teams delved into the critical details of the integration plan. When it finally ended, Marcus approached me, rather than Ryan, to schedule follow-up sessions. As the room emptied, Ryan cornered me by the door. His voice was quiet but intense. "You deliberately undermined me in there." I answered technical questions accurately. I replied evenly. "That's my job." "Your job is whatever I say it is," he hissed. "I'm SVP of strategy, and right now you're not part of the strategy I'm envisioning for the post-acquisition leadership." He walked away before I could respond, already pulling out his phone. I later learned he went straight to Amanda's office. The next day, Jackson called me in for a closed-door meeting. He looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact as he spoke. "Amanda has concerns about your collaboration with the strategic direction," he began. You mean my unwillingness to misrepresent our technical capabilities to global finance? I asked. Jackson winced. That's not how it's being characterized. Ryan has suggested that you're resistant to change and overly pessimistic about integration timelines. I'm responsible for ensuring these systems actually work after the merger, I said. Being realistic about complexity isn't pessimism, it's professional integrity. I understand that, Jackson said, finally meeting my eyes. And for what it's worth, I agree with your approach. But Amanda is convinced that Ryan's vision for an accelerated integration is key to maximizing the deal's value. And when that accelerated timeline proves impossible to meet, Jackson sighed, by then the deal will be closed. Problems can be addressed as they arise. I left that meeting understanding that facts and expertise were being subordinated to politics and family loyalty. My anxiety worsened, manifesting as insomnia and stress headaches. I found myself working 12-hour days trying to create contingency plans for the inevitable failures Ryan's approach would cause. The company atmosphere grew increasingly tense. People took sides, with most of the technical staff supporting me, while those with ambitions for post-merger leadership aligned with Ryan. Hallway conversations would stop when I approached. Meetings became political minefields. Through it all, I maintained my professionalism, focusing on documenting everything meticulously. If I couldn't prevent the coming disaster, I could at least ensure there was a clear record of the warnings that had been ignored. What I didn't realize was that Ryan wasn't just planning to sideline me. He was building a case to remove me entirely, choosing the moment when it would be most devastating. The day that changed everything started normally enough. I arrived early to prepare for what would be the most important meeting of the acquisition process, the full technical transition planning session with Global Finance's complete integration team. This wasn't just another update meeting. This was where we would lock in the detailed implementation plan for merging our systems after the acquisition closed. Marcus had specifically requested my presence along with my key team members. The decisions made today would shape months of work to come. I had spent the weekend finalizing our presentation and transition documents, ensuring every technical detail was accurately represented. My team and I had prepared answers for any conceivable question. We were ready. The large conference room was already filling up when I arrived 15 minutes early. Global Finance had sent 8 people, including Marcus and their senior technical leads. From our side, my core team of 5 was present, along with Jackson and several other department heads. Ryan arrived last, just as we were about to begin. He walked in with Amanda and 3 people I didn't recognize, all carrying folders with the TechFin logo. Before we begin the technical discussion, Amanda announced, I want to share some organizational updates that will affect our integration planning. My stomach tightened. This hadn't been on the agenda. Amanda smiled brightly. I'm excited to announce a reorganization of our technical leadership to better align with Global Finance's structure. Ryan will be heading a new technical strategy office that will oversee all integration activities. She gestured to the 3 strangers. These are our new technical directors who will be reporting to Ryan and leading the integration streams. They come to us with extensive experience in corporate mergers. I sat frozen, trying to process what was happening. This reorganization effectively removed me and my team from our central role in the integration. Marcus frowned slightly. I was under the impression Terry would be leading the technical transition. Her team has been our primary point of contact throughout the due diligence process. Before Amanda could respond, Ryan stepped forward. Terry's team has done preliminary work, he said smoothly. But for a transition of this magnitude, we needed leadership with specific merger experience. Terry's role has been more operational than strategic. I couldn't remain silent. My team has built and documented every system involved in this transition. We've created the entire integration framework you've been reviewing for months. Ryan gave me a cold smile before turning to Marcus. And we appreciate that groundwork. Now we're elevating the approach with leaders who specialize in larger-scale corporate integrations. Marcus didn't look convinced. Will Terry and her team still be involved? Their system knowledge has been invaluable to our planning. And that's when it happened, the moment that would replay in my mind for months afterward. Ryan glanced at my employee badge, then looked at Jackson. The role is replaceable. The person filling it is irrelevant, he said with a dismissive smirk. What matters is the process and methodology, not individual contributors. The room went silent. I felt as if all the air had been sucked out, leaving me struggling to breathe. 8 years of dedication reduced to irrelevance in front of the colleagues and clients who had respected my expertise. I looked to Jackson, waiting for him to defend his direct report to challenge this characterization of a critical role. He looked down at his notepad, saying nothing. Amanda quickly tried to smooth over the moment. What Ryan means is that we've built robust documentation and knowledge transfer processes. The integration won't be dependent on any single person. But the damage was done. I sat through the rest of the meeting in a haze of shock and humiliation, watching as Ryan introduced his new directors, who stumbled through presentations clearly prepared by someone else. They couldn't answer basic questions about our systems, instead promising to follow up on almost every technical query. Marcus grew increasingly frustrated, directing his questions to me several times, only to have Ryan or one of his directors intercept and provide vague, often incorrect answers. As the meeting finally ended, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from HR requesting my immediate presence. I knew what was coming. The HR director, Laura Bennett, was waiting with a security officer. Her expression was professionally sympathetic, but remote. "Terry, as part of the reorganization, your position has been eliminated," she said, sliding a document across the table. "This outlines your severance package, which includes 8 weeks of pay and continuation of benefits through the end of the month." I stared at the paper without touching it. "You're firing me in the middle of the acquisition's most critical phase." "We're eliminating your role," she corrected gently. "The new structure doesn't include a director of systems integration position." She pushed another document forward. "This is a standard non-disclosure agreement. It prohibits you from discussing confidential company information, including details of the acquisition and your separation. Signing is a condition of receiving your severance." I felt numb as I scanned the document. It explicitly prevented me from contacting global finance or discussing any aspect of the technical transition with anyone outside TechFin. "What happens to my team?" I asked. "They'll be reassigned to the new directors," Laura replied. "Ryan will be meeting with them this afternoon." The security officer stepped forward, holding out a box. "We'll need your laptop badge and company phone. I'll escort you to your office to collect any personal items." And just like that, my 8-year career at TechFin ended. I was walked through the office like a criminal past wide-eyed colleagues who had no warning this was happening. Samantha tried to approach, but was waved off by the security officer. I could only shake my head slightly, signaling that I couldn't talk. My office, filled with 8 years of professional history, had to be packed up in 20 minutes under supervision. Family photos, industry awards, even my coffee mug, all went into a cardboard box, a pathetic container for nearly a decade of my professional life. As I was escorted to the exit, I caught a glimpse of Ryan watching from the doorway of Amanda's office, not even trying to hide his satisfied expression. Outside, sitting in my car in the parking garage, the shock finally gave way to tears. Tears of anger, humiliation, and betrayal. I had given everything to this company, often at the expense of my personal life. The knowledge I carried, the systems I had built and nurtured, all of it dismissed as irrelevant. I drove home in a daze, the box of belongings on my passenger seat, like a silent witness to my professional execution. When I finally checked my phone, I had dozens of messages from team members and colleagues, all expressing shock and support. One message stood out. It was from Samantha. "This is Ryan's doing. Amanda didn't even know until this morning. He convinced her it was necessary for the deal. Everyone is stunned. This will backfire on them, I promise." Her words offered little comfort as I sat alone in my apartment trying to process how quickly and cruelly everything had changed. I had gone from respected technical leader to unemployed in less than 2 hours, labeled irrelevant by someone who barely understood what I did. What I didn't realize then was that Ryan's smug certainty about my irrelevance was about to be his undoing. By removing me, he had unknowingly planted the seeds of the acquisition's destruction, and I would do absolutely nothing to stop it. The days following my firing passed in a blur of anger and uncertainty. I fluctuated between despair over my sudden joblessness and rage at the injustice of how I'd been discarded. My phone continued to buzz with messages from former colleagues, most expressing shock and support, some asking technical questions they now had no one to answer. I responded to the personal messages but ignored the technical queries. The NDA I had signed prevented me from discussing company matters, a restriction I now plan to follow with malicious compliance. Samantha called me daily with updates. The office was in chaos. My team was devastated and confused, uncertain who they reported to or what their priorities should be. The new directors were struggling to understand systems they were supposedly leading the integration for. They spent 3 hours today trying to figure out where the authentication service documentation is, Samantha reported, not hiding her satisfaction. It's exactly where it's always been, in the main repository, but nobody knows the structure you created. I'm sure Ryan's strategic vision will guide them to it eventually, I replied dryly. People are starting to see through him, Samantha continued. Jackson looks like he hasn't slept in days. Even Amanda seems concerned. They've postponed 2 follow-up meetings with Global Finance because they aren't ready. I felt a grim satisfaction at this news, but it didn't improve my immediate situation. I needed to find a new job. I updated my resume and LinkedIn profile, reaching out to my professional network. The response was encouraging. Many companies were interested in someone with my expertise, but interviews would take time and my savings wouldn't last forever. Meanwhile, I consulted with an employment attorney about my termination. He reviewed my severance agreement and NDA. The termination itself is probably legal, he advised. Virginia is an at-will employment state. The NDA, however, has some potentially overreaching provisions. Such as, it attempts to prevent you from discussing publicly known information about the company which isn't enforceable. However, the restrictions on contacting Global Finance or discussing the acquisition are probably valid. So I can't reach out to anyone at Global Finance. Not about TechFin matters, no. If they contact you, the situation becomes more ambiguous. You can't share confidential information, but simple factual answers about your former role might be acceptable. I nodded, a plan already forming in my mind. I wouldn't violate the NDA by reaching out, but if contacted, I would be scrupulously honest about why I couldn't help. A week after my firing, the consequences of my absence began accelerating. Samantha reported that Ryan's team had presented an updated transition plan to their internal steering committee that contained several critical technical errors. They completely misunderstood how the payment reconciliation system interfaces with the core banking platform, she said. If they followed this plan, transactions could be duplicated or lost entirely. Did anyone point this out, I asked. Several people tried. Ryan said they were being obstructionist and resistant to change. Jackson started to raise concerns, but backed down when Ryan suggested they were your talking points. 2 days later, Jackson himself called me. I let it go to voicemail. Terry, it's Jackson. I hope you're doing well. Listen, I know things ended abruptly. I want you to know I disagreed with how it was handled. We have some questions about the escrow account integration that only you would know the answers to. Could you call me back? It's important for the deal. I didn't return the call. The next day, he called again. Terry, please. There are some critical gaps in the transition documentation. The Global Finance team is asking questions we can't answer. This could affect everyone's future at the company. Again, I didn't respond. Let them feel the consequences of declaring me irrelevant. 3 more days passed. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Terry Wilson speaking. Miss Wilson, this is Marcus Blackwell from Global Finance. My heart raced, but I kept my voice neutral. Hello, Mr. Blackwell. Please, it's Marcus. I've just learned about your departure from TechFin. To say I'm surprised would be an understatement. These things happen in corporate restructurings, I replied carefully. Not usually to the person who understands the entire system architecture in the middle of an acquisition, he said. We have serious concerns about the transition plan we're now receiving. There are inconsistencies with the documentation you previously provided. I remained silent, unwilling to volunteer information that might violate my NDA. Marcus continued. We have a critical integration meeting tomorrow. Ryan has presented a revised timeline that accelerates several key migration phases. Our technical team has questions that no one at TechFin seems able to answer. Would you be willing to join the call as a consultant? Here it was the moment of truth. I took a deep breath. I appreciate your trust in my expertise, Marcus. Unfortunately, I signed a non-disclosure agreement that specifically prohibits me from discussing TechFin systems or the acquisition with Global Finance. I'm not able to participate in any transition meetings. There was a long pause. I see Marcus finally set his tone, making it clear that he understood the fuller picture. That's unusually restrictive for a standard departure. It was presented as a condition of receiving severance, I explained. So you can't answer any questions about the systems you built and maintained for 8 years. That's correct. The agreement specifically prevents me from sharing any information that might impact the acquisition process. Another long pause. That's very illuminating, Terry. Thank you for your candor about what you can't do. After we hung up, I sat staring at the phone, wondering what would happen next. I didn't have to wait long to find out. The following morning, my phone exploded with messages and missed calls. 3 from Jackson, 2 from Amanda, and several from numbers at TechFin I didn't recognize. I ignored them all, focusing instead on preparing for a job interview I had scheduled for the afternoon. Samantha called around noon, and I picked up immediately. "Oh my God, Terry, you won't believe what happened," she said, her voice a mixture of shock and barely suppressed glee. The global finance meeting was a complete disaster. What do you mean? Marcus specifically requested your presence for the technical review. Ryan tried to explain that you were no longer with the company and that his team was fully prepared to address all concerns. I could imagine the scene, Ryan smooth-talking and projecting unearned confidence. Marcus wasn't having it, Samantha continued. He said their technical due diligence had been based on your documentation and explanations, and they needed continuity. When Ryan insisted they proceed without you, Marcus asked him directly if they had prevented you from participating. What did Ryan say? I asked, already knowing the answer. He fumbled, saying something about standard confidentiality protocols. Marcus just nodded and said they should continue the meeting to see if Ryan's team could address their concerns. And I'm guessing they couldn't. It was a bloodbath, Samantha said with satisfaction. Basic questions about system dependencies that any of us could answer, but Ryan's new directors just kept saying they'd have to circle back. Marcus kept asking about specific architectural elements you had explained previously, and no one could provide clear answers. After about 40 minutes, Marcus said he needed to consult with his team and ended the call abruptly. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, vindication, satisfaction, but also concern for my former team members whose jobs might be affected by the fallout. There's more, Samantha said. Amanda called an emergency meeting right afterward. She was furious, demanding to know why no one could answer Global Finance's questions. Ryan tried to blame your documentation, saying it was incomplete. My documentation that won praise from Marcus himself. I couldn't help but interject. Exactly. Several people spoke up saying the documentation was comprehensive, but that you were the one who understood how all the pieces fit together. Amanda asked why they hadn't ensured knowledge transfer before letting you go. Ryan had no good answer. I was processing this when another call came in from Jackson. I ignored it. They're panicking, Samantha continued. Jackson has been trying to reach you non-stop. Amanda even asked if I had your personal contact information. And what did you tell her? That I'd try to reach you but couldn't promise anything. Terry, I think they're realizing how badly they screwed up. Over the next 24 hours, the situation escalated dramatically. Jackson left increasingly desperate voicemails. Terry, please call me back. Global Finance has serious concerns about proceeding without your involvement. We need to find a way to bring you in as a consultant. Terry, Amanda has authorized me to offer you a consulting contract at triple your previous salary, just to help us through the transition. Please call me. Terry, this is urgent. Marcus has indicated they may reconsider the entire acquisition if we can't address their technical concerns. We can tear up the NDA. Whatever you need, just name it. I listened to each message, but didn't respond. Part of me wanted to return triumphantly as their savior, but a deeper part knew that any organization that would discard a loyal employee so callously didn't deserve a second chance. The final act came 3 days later. Samantha called me, her voice subdued. It's over. Global Finance has walked away from the deal. Despite expecting this outcome, I felt a shock. They canceled the entire acquisition. Marcus called a meeting with just Amanda and the board. Ryan wasn't invited. Marcus explained that their technical due diligence had been based largely on the architecture and transition plans you created. Without your involvement, they had significant concerns about implementation risks. What was Ryan's reaction? I asked. Meltdown doesn't begin to describe it. He stormed into Amanda's office shouting about breach of contract and how global finance was negotiating in bad faith. Amanda told him to shut up, that he was the one who had insisted on removing you without proper knowledge transfer. The story spread quickly through my professional network. TechFin's stock dropped 15% when news broke that the acquisition had failed. Industry blogs speculated about technical integration concerns being the primary reason, with some specifically mentioning the unexplained departure of key technical leadership during due diligence. 2 weeks later, Ryan was gone, his strategic vision having strategically crashed the biggest deal in the company's history. Jackson called one last time, leaving a message that was part apology, part job offer. "Terry, I failed you as a manager and I'm deeply sorry. Ryan has been removed from the company. Amanda has asked me to see if you'd consider coming back with a promotion and significant compensation adjustment. We need to rebuild what was broken, and no one understands our systems like you do." I didn't call him back. Instead, I accepted an offer from another company, a competitor who valued technical expertise and had a strict no nepotism policy. 3 months after my firing, my phone rang with an unexpected caller ID, Marcus Blackwell. "Terry, I hope I'm not overstepping by calling. Your NDA with TechFin wouldn't apply to future opportunities, would it?" "It wouldn't," I confirmed. "What can I help you with?" "Global Finance is still interested in expanding our financial software capabilities. We've identified another potential acquisition, but we need someone who understands system integration to lead our technical due diligence. Someone who values accuracy over politics. Would you be interested in discussing a role as our VP of Integration Strategy?" The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd be very interested in that discussion, Marcus. Sometimes being irrelevant is the most powerful position of all. I accepted Marcus's offer to join Global Finance as Vice President of Integration Strategy, a title that came with substantially better compensation and authority than I'd had at TechFin. The position placed me on the executive leadership track, something that would have taken years longer at my former company if it had happened at all. My first project was leading the technical evaluation of a different financial software company, one that actually complemented Global Finance's services better than TechFin would have. The acquisition completed successfully 3 months later, praised by industry analysts as a textbook example of thorough due diligence and integration planning. TechFin, meanwhile, continued to struggle in the aftermath of the failed deal. Their stock never fully recovered, and several key employees left, including Samantha, who I happily recruited to join my team at Global Finance. Jackson eventually departed too, moving to a smaller company where he wouldn't be caught between executives and his team. Amanda announced her retirement a year later, the failed acquisition having tarnished her legacy. About 6 months after I started at Global Finance, I received an unexpected email from Jackson. "I owe you a more complete apology than a voicemail could convey," he wrote. "I failed you as a manager and as a colleague when I didn't stand up to Ryan's tactics. I convinced myself that staying silent was protecting the team and the company, but in reality, I was only protecting myself. When Ryan called you irrelevant, I should have immediately contradicted him. My silence in that moment will haunt me for the rest of my career. I've learned a painful but necessary lesson about moral courage and what true leadership requires. I'm glad to see you thriving at Global Finance, where your talents are clearly valued." I appreciated his honesty, even if it came too late to change what happened. I wrote back wishing him well in his new role, a brief but cordial response that acknowledged his apology without fully absolving him. Some betrayals can be understood, but not erased. The professional aftermath was only part of my journey. The emotional impact of being so callously discarded took longer to process. For months after my firing, I experienced anxiety, insomnia, and occasional panic attacks, especially when facing new workplace situations. The trauma of public humiliation and betrayal had left deeper scars than I initially recognized. With encouragement from Samantha and my sister, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in workplace trauma. Those sessions helped me understand that my reaction wasn't weakness, but a normal response to an abnormal situation. Gradually, I developed healthier boundaries and expectations for professional relationships. "Your value doesn't come from your job," my therapist reminded me in one particularly important session. "What happened wasn't a reflection of your worth or abilities. It was a reflection of a toxic system that prioritized politics over competence." That perspective helped me reclaim my professional confidence without tying my entire identity to my career. I began rebuilding other areas of my life that I had neglected while working those endless hours at TechFin. I reconnected with old friends, took up hiking on weekends, and even started dating again after a long period of focusing solely on my career. At Global Finance, I made it a priority to create a team culture based on respect, recognition, and ethical leadership. I implemented clear knowledge-sharing processes, mentorship programs, and succession planning to ensure no single person became an indispensable silo of information, myself included. I wanted sustainable excellence, not irreplaceable heroes. Marcus became not just my boss, but a valued mentor who taught me about navigating executive leadership without compromising integrity. Under his guidance, I developed political savvy without becoming political skills. I had previously disdained but now recognized as necessary tools for protecting my team and our work. 3 years after the TechFin debacle, I ran into Ryan at an industry conference. He was working for a consulting firm several steps down from his previous SVP position. He saw me across the room, registered my VP badge and Global Finance logo, and promptly headed in the opposite direction. I felt no need to pursue a confrontation. His avoidance was confirmation enough that he recognized the consequences of his actions. Looking back now, 5 years later, I can see that being fired was ultimately one of the best things that happened to me professionally, though I would never have chosen the humiliating way it occurred. It forced me out of a company where politics would always outweigh performance, and into an organization that valued expertise and integrity. The experience taught me several profound lessons that I now share with the teams I lead. First, document everything, not out of paranoia, but because clear records protect both you and your work from misrepresentation. Second, build alliances based on mutual respect and integrity. Samantha's loyalty and Marcus's recognition of my value were critical lifelines during the darkest period. Third, know when silence is more powerful than argument. I could have fought publicly, violated my NDA, or tried to sabotage the deal out of spite. Instead, I simply stepped aside and let reality prove my worth. Fourth, recognize that your skills and knowledge belong to you, not your employer. Companies may control your time temporarily, but your expertise goes with you everywhere. Finally, understand that true professional value isn't determined by those who underestimate you. Ryan called me irrelevant because my competence threatened him. His opinion reflected his insecurities, not my capabilities. I still think about that moment in the conference room sometimes when Ryan smirked and declared me irrelevant. At the time, it felt like the end of everything I had worked for. Now I recognize it as the moment that freed me from a situation that would have always limited my growth. Being underestimated can be a secret advantage. While painful, it pushes you to environments where you're properly valued and creates the sweetest kind of success, proving wrong those who dismissed you, not through argument, but through undeniable results. Have you ever been underestimated or pushed aside only to find greater success elsewhere? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes our greatest professional setbacks lead to unexpected victories. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need to hear that being called irrelevant doesn't make it true. Thanks for listening, and remember that your value isn't determined by those who fail to see it.